everyone. My name is Chloe Smith, and this is my JAR Stage 5 PsychTalk presentation. The title of my article was Stress Levels and its Association with Self-Harm and Risk-Taking Behaviors in Medical Undergraduates. The aim of this investigation was to assess the levels of stress and its associated adverse behavioral effects in undergraduate medical students in a tertiary care medical college. All of the researchers for this investigation were a part of the Department of Psychiatry at the Dr. D.Y. Patil Medical College in Maharashtra. The authors' names are Preeti Menon, Suprakash Chaudhary, Daniel Saldana, Samishka Sahu, Vashdev Singh, and Vinyak Pathak. It's time to get into the real interesting stuff. The topic of my paper was about evaluating the potential connection between an individual's perceived stress and any adverse behavioral effects in undergraduate medical students, and the adverse behavioral effects being measured were the risk-taking or self-harm behaviors of these students. Additionally, we all can generally understand from our own lives the relationship between stress and the behaviors and the choices that we start to make in our own lives. And this investigation really wanted to hone in on the effects that this has on medical students, specifically because of the amount of stress that they endure on a day-to-day basis and the toll that that can have on someone's mental health or their physical health. The next section of this investigation is our methods and materials. The researchers investigated the stress levels, socio-demographic data, and the prevalence of risk-taking and self-harm behaviors to better understand the impact that medical school has on the health of its students. In order to study this topic, the researchers provided a series of questionnaires to evaluate the perceived stress of an individual, any risk-taking behaviors, self-harm behaviors, or any other student stress that might be affecting that individual at that time. There were 405 total medical students between the years of 2 and 4 that volunteered for this research project. All of these students were from their urban medical college in Maharashtra. Out of these 405 total students, there were 252 females and 153 males. The average age of all of these students was 20.86 years. They were all generally right around the same age, which is very good in terms of consistency for this experiment. In terms of what the researchers found, they found that males scored higher on the risk-taking and the total score, which is the risk-taking plus self-harm behaviors. But they found that females did not score higher on self-harm, as expected, but did score lower on the total score. All of the participants exhibited a connection between their perceived stress and the increased risk of self-harm and risk-taking behaviors. The more stressed we are, the more risky we are. The fourth conclusion of this article was that stress levels were consistent between all of the participants, and that ultimately the introduction of early programs to intervene in student stress and teach students how to cope in healthy ways would be incredibly beneficial for the student population. Lastly, in terms of critiques, there are 4 major ones that I really wanted to focus on for this investigation. Primarily, all of the participants were from the same university. This is not necessarily a bad thing, but it is important to consider when discussing how applicable this investigation is to other medical schools and other programs across the world. Additionally, there was no data provided about the participants' finances, their races, or cultures. I personally believe that all of these things have a really significant impact on the way that somebody manages their stress and how much stress they're experiencing. Friends of mine who are in a lot more debt experience a lot more stress, and that's just part of, surviving in this world. And I think that those were important factors that should have been considered in this paper, and are now what I consider to be confounding variables. Next is the date of publish. This article was published in 2018, which is relatively recent, which I would consider a strength. But with that being said, there have been a lot of major world events that have happened between 2018 and now. And In a lot of studies, I don't think that would impact the results, but in this one specifically, when talking about mental health, things like the COVID-19 pandemic and many other world events have shown to significantly impact the mental health of students. So the conclusion about potentially implementing mental health and coping programs at universities might be more important now. And finally, the questionnaires were provided and collected all at once, and no date was enclosed as to when those questionnaires were actually provided. It sounds a little silly, I guess, but in terms of the students' stress levels, if they provided the questionnaires right before exam season, right after exam season, right after a break, the stress levels of the students, both baseline and how they are coping, if they're incredibly burnt out from an incredibly long semester and they're at the very end, they might not be coping as well, and they might be taking more risk-taking or self-harm behaviors. Thank you.